I'm Barry. So we're going to get going. And again, I am really grateful because I believe the Mastermind is the greatest vault of coaching videos out there of how to be a better coach. And this one really might be the one we all need the most. And that is about emotional intelligence. And so, Barry, I met you through Dr. Gilbert, and
Correct.
Barry has spoke to the mastermind. His wife Brett has spoke to the mastermind. He's mental performance trained by Brian Kane, and so he's one of us. But I'll let you, give us a 20-second or 30-second introduction of you.
Well, I've my whole life has been dedicated to coaching and coaching baseball on the college level. Um, I started at George Mason University in 1988. Um, uh, then I went to Frostburg State, finished my master's degree. Then I got a job at a junior college in South Jersey. Was there for 11 years. Moved to Georgia for 4 years to coach at NAI school. And then I got the job at Rider University in New Jersey, and I was there for 20 years. So 35 years of head coaching experience in terms of the coaching part. I have a master's degree in education and a PhD in sports leadership. So, and we can get into a little bit of that here in a second. But that's basically the coaching history there. It's been all baseball, but now it's more about coaching as a profession and leadership as a profession and trying to help others see it the way that I know that I think is the right way now, or the more correct way to go about the day-to-day activities of coaching, as opposed to the authoritarian style of my way or the highway type thing. So let's get started. Um, I mean, my credentials are great, but there was a time when I wasn't so great. Um, One story in particular, we were driving vans. We had a game in North Jersey. Let me see, I'm 32 years old at the time, 31 actually. And we're driving the vans. My assistant coach is behind me, and we're on the turnpike. And out of nowhere, a piece of ice lands on my leg. So some guys are messing around in the back. So I see the ice on my leg, and I don't even blink. I just whip the van over to the shoulder. The van behind me follows me, parks that I get out of the van. Cars are flying by me. I mean, we're talking, major highway here, turnpike. I get to the van behind me. I tell everybody to get out of the van and start running. So they're literally running down the shoulder of the New Jersey Turnpike while I and my assistant are following them in the van. And you got to picture it now. Within 2 minutes, the state police are coming, and they pull up. Well, I see them, so we stop. The guy stopped running, and he pulls in front of me and he says, "Coach," and he knows I'm a coach. I mean, I got Gloucester County College that's pinned on the side of the van. I'm not like I'm trying to hide it. I mean, this has got to be the dumbest thing you've ever done in your life. And he says, "Coach, you got to get him off the highway." And I said, I'm trying to teach him a lesson. And he didn't ask. He said, "Coach, you got to get him off the highway now." So I did. And then we drove to the next stop. And of course, I probably unloaded on him while we were there. But the message here is like at that particular time, I mean, here's a highway that has 63,000 drivers per day or per week. There's at least a fatality here and there. And I have 17, 18, 19, 20 year olds running down the shoulder of one of the busiest highways in the East. And that got me thinking that, and I didn't think anything was wrong. I went back. No one said anything. No one went to the boss. There was no video because, my God, today, everything would have been on a camera. which I don't think I would have done it now. But think about this now. Why was what went on in my head that caused me to react that way? And this is that reaction that day. Now you can only imagine the other situations that I had in my career or early in my career that were very similar, that I would just lose my mind. Now, how does this happen? Well, first of all, when I got the job, I was 24. And when you're 24 years old and you look younger than 24, and the players are 6 years old, 4 to 6 years younger than you, you have to, get this persona that you're a tough guy and that you're going to make sure they understand, who's in charge. And then, back then you had coaches like Bobby Knight, Bill Parcells. So when you're reading about them and you're watching them on TV, you're kind of emulating these guys, um, because you're imitating the coach. Bobby Knight's the general. I mean, he's like one of these great coaches. And so, as a young person, I'm being influenced by, those types of coaches. And then it was just one of those, time periods where, you could say those types of things and do those types of things. And it was a very unhealthy type of atmosphere for our players and for me that I now realize. I mean, I didn't realize any of that at all. So I coached for pretty much 25 years at that pace, you know, authoritative, my way or the highway. And the funniest thing is, I mean, of all coaches across the country, high school, college, pro, I am probably the only coach that said, listen, it's my way or the highway. And I actually lived up to it, because we were running down the highway. Um, not proud of it, but I think that there was something there. Um, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Um, so what became of that? So then I wanted to study. Um, I went into, work on my PhD, and I wanted to learn how and why coaches that could win and transform programs where the coach before them or multiple coaches before them couldn't. How do they do it? What is the blueprint? I interviewed 9 college coaches. Between them now, there's 7 national championships between them. And what I discovered was there's 5 pillars or 5 foundational elements that you must have in your program to be able to transform it. The first one was leadership and leadership development, number one. Number two was consistency and consistent communication. They kind of tied together. 3 was they had to have high standards. 4 was they had to be the right people, the right fit. And lastly, the coach and the program itself overall had to have a growth mindset, which meant you were always trying to improve the program. You didn't settle for, okay, this is the only way. You didn't have a fixed mindset and say, okay, we can't do this or do that. So, but all 5 of those have to be together. And if you think about it, if you pull any one of those out, you're going to struggle at some point. Some you might, if you pull out the right fit, you might struggle immediately. You pull out growth mindset, you might not be able to sustain it because you're not evolving with the times. But what I discovered, remember now, competence is always there. Everybody, you got to have the confidence. You got to know what you're doing. But we need to add the 6th pillar, the one that's kind of the deal breaker. And the one thing is it's emotional intelligence. And people, the great coaches, I think, the great CEOs, the great leaders, they have that. And think about it. How many articles do you read or watch videos on a strategy or how to do something? And then you see the same amount of articles and videos on how to teach that strategy, how to do it. And I've gone to the last 2 years, I've gone to 2 conventions, and there's been 46 speeches, and not one speech, not one clinician, not one talker, presenter spoke about emotional intelligence or some version of that. Which, think about it, most of us never really get trained that way. How many leadership classes did you take in high school? How many unless you get into graduate school, and most people don't go to graduate school. Most people, high school or, college, some of them don't even get that. But to be able to train yourself in emotional intelligence. So, how do we get there? And what is it? Because when I ask those questions to the coaches, I would say more than half of them weren't sure what the answer was. They didn't know how to answer it
Can
because they
can
didn't know
we
what
do
it was.
this, Barry? We got a few, Kurt Thor's very smart. We got some smart guys in here. Well, any of you guys mind saying what you think emotional intelligence is? Can you define it? Because I couldn't have before I talked to Barry.
Ooh, that's a tough one, Randy. That's a
No,
tough
man.
one out the
Like,
gate. I think two things. I don't know. I think it's knowing people, but I think more than anything else, and I think it's my dad taught me this a lot, and I don't know if it's emotional intelligence, but always being able to anticipate the consequence of everything you do. The decisions you make, how's it going to affect people? How's it going to affect down the road? How's it going to affect? And I think people who have great EQ always know if I make this decision, what may or may not happen. So they always make the right decision. I mean, that's kind of where I always fall back to.
Okay.
Not sure, Barry, if that's what you would define it as, but
Well, I think it's, you can, each one of us, see it a certain way. Any other, anybody else want to ask, or anybody suggest or what they think it might
well,
be?
so here's, y'all, I called Barry about 3 hours ago because I was worried about this session. I was worried if I even knew enough about emotional intelligence to ask him good questions. So for me, emotional intelligence is not acting like an idiot on the sideline. Ken, I saw where you unmuted. Do you have a better answer than that?
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say too. I was like, you have to know the kids. So, some of them you can maybe get away with being a little harder on, and some of them, it's a handshake. And when I go down the line, I talk to them during, pre-practice and pre-game and stuff like that. You kind of, emotional intelligence to me is you have to know, and it's tough because you have a team of, like, for us, 80, 90 guys. You have to know what each one needs emotionally, not just physically. You know what I mean? We all go to the weight room. We all do the same thing, but you can't treat them all the same because they're all different.
Okay.
And Barry, I know you've got a lot, okay, but I like asking questions. So why is emotional intelligence? So every athletic directors ought to have every coach on his staff watch this or her on her staff watch this. Why is emotional intelligence so vital in 2025 for coaches?
Well, the short answer is because, kids today don't think the same way they used to think. Um, there's a soft skill and a hard skill, and I think, I was able to. I think I do have a growth mindset, and I was able to adjust to, being a more empathetic coach. You still have that, it's kind of a loving lunatic type thing, you know. One way to say it, like, you still care, but you still, you're still aggressive, and you still want to be, teaching and loading up. But emotional intelligence, the guy that did the most work, there's a ton of research on it, but Daniel Goleman is the guy. He's the father of emotional intelligence. He wrote a book, why EQ matters more than IQ. That's not the exact title, but that's essentially it. And he says that 20% of your success is attributed to IQ. The other 80% are other factors. And those other factors are emotional intelligence. So you think about your best players, you think about the people that you work with, the the really, really book smart people a lot of times don't have those common sense type things, to be able to recognize and have awareness and be able to stay calm when things are not calm. So IQ is not as important as EQ. There's five things. There's five things that make up emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. So that is like your mood. How do you feel? And being able to recognize that. For me, when I'm running the guys down the turnpike, it's high energy and being unpleasant. That's like being very upset, as opposed to being pleasant and having high energy, where you have energy, enthusiasm, and excitement. You're fun loving, you're into it, you're smiling. Low energy and pleasant would be like you're calm, melancholy, kind of hanging out, relaxing, just kind of chilling out. And then there's, low energy and unpleasant, kind of like you're depressed. You're down, misery. So everybody has a mood, like everybody's in a mood. So what is that mood? So for me, what I try to do is try to get myself in the proper mood. I know how I feel is I self-talk. Through self-talk, I get myself to be more positive. The second thing is regulating your emotions, which running guys down the turnpike is not regulating your emotions. Breaking fungo bats and throwing balls in the woods and making guys go chase them, that's not regulating your emotions. And again, for me, it's talk, it's breathing, it's relaxation. So, trying to get yourself, you're the leader, you're in charge, set the example. So if you tell yourself that, and you have the mental part of it, the big body language where you're in charge, you be the bigger man. But number two is self-control. Three is motivation and grit, perseverance. When things don't go well, you're able to channel through that and work through those hard times. That's never been a problem for me. But a lot of times my emotions getting through that were never consistent. And then the fourth thing is empathy, listening skills, being able to put yourself in their shoes, feel what they're feeling, as opposed to, someone gets hurt on the field. Notice if you watch the old football games now, if it's a serious injury or pretty serious where the guy doesn't get right up, the head coach a lot of times now comes out. And 25 years ago, you might not see that. They would, not say it was a serious injury, but I think people are more compassionate now. So you have to be that. And the last one is social awareness. Like you can kind of read the room. You know what to say, what not to say. You think before you say something. You're aware of what's really going on. That's the one where I think is the worst. I see the most examples. That and self-control are the two that come about the most. I can't see a lot of times how you're feeling. That's why they call emotional intelligence the hidden driver of excellence. That's been quoted as saying it's the hidden driver of excellence. So for me, empathy, trying to listen, and you want to listen to someone like you're listening to me now, as if there's going to be a quiz at the end of the talk. So you're really listening to what I'm saying, and I think that's a tough skill that you have to be able to. You have to work at that. But those are the five. So it's self-awareness, self-control, motivation, empathy, and social awareness. The first three are self-management. The last two are social awareness or social intelligence. So it's kind of a mixture of your feelings. So you're regulating your emotions and you're able to regulate and to manipulate and see the emotions of other people and to be able to change that. So those are the five. But what I decided was, okay, I always try to work in threes. What are three things that we can do to be great coaches, great leaders, and be strong at emotional intelligence without having to take the scientific complexity that it can bring and simplify it. Because that's what we do as coaches anyway. We try to make it as simple as possible so we can learn it. And the first one for me is control your emotions. That's I mean, to me, that's the first one. I mean, I interviewed King Rice. King Rice was the point guard for North Carolina in the late 80s and the first couple years of the 90s. He played for Dean Smith, who's considered one of the greatest coaches of all time. And King told me, as I asked him a little bit about Smith, because I knew this was going to be an emotional intelligence talk, and I said, "What is it about Smith that makes him so good?" He said, "One, he would never embarrass you. Two, he never cursed. Three, and probably the one that sticks to my mind, he said, no matter how bad it got in the game, whether we were playing poorly, it's a bad call, or it's just one of those things where it's just adversity, 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 he was never shook. Never. If you go back and look at the documentaries on him, you'll see it. He was never shook. So can you do that? Can you stay in that kind of consistent, controlled mode? There's two other stories. Walt Bittinger was the CEO at Charles Schwab. So what he would do when he interviewed employees, he would go to breakfast and he would meet them at the restaurant, but he'd get there a little earlier and he would tell the manager to have them screw up the order for the person that he's interviewing to see what their reaction would be. They ordered pancakes and they brought them eggs, or what are any of those types of topics, anything that would make the guy possibly lose his cool or her lose her cool. So being able to see how they would react to something like that. Abraham Lincoln, which is really interesting because now we're going back to the 1800s and Abraham Lincoln, what he would do. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote a book, Leadership in Turbulent Times, and what he would do is he would write what he would call a hot letter. So if he was upset with someone, he would write the letter. I mean, firing them or demeaning them. I mean, he would just unleash his wrath on that particular person. He would get the letter, he'd put it in the envelope, and then he'd put it in the drawer. And he would never send it. So it was like he was getting it off his chest, and he was kind of in our world today. It's like, how many times do you write an email and then you send it off without really relaxing, calming down, and just being patient, pressing pause? And I think those are two clear examples. I mean, he fired George Meade at the Battle of Gettysburg, but he never sent the letter. So that's something that I think we have knee-jerk reactions to being able to control your emotions. And Daniel Goleman said this, and I told you this earlier, Randy. He says, when people get angry, it makes really smart people stupid because it's so easy to get angry and it's so much more difficult to stay calm. So and for me, it's breathing. It's the self-talk walk is what I call it. When I go to practice, I get myself mentally prepared to handle what I know is going to be adverse times during practice. There's never been a practice where everything went perfect. There's never been a class I've ever taught that went perfect. There's never anything that's gone perfect. But I would kind of prepare myself on en route. So when I got there, I was ready to go. Now in game, I got to where it was just deep breath. Try to stay calm. Sometimes I would turn around. I'd have a bottle of water. I'd drink some water real quick. Not in every sport you can do that, but you notice a lot of the great coaches today. They don't fly off the handle. They stay pretty calm, and I think that's something that I've really worked hard at. And I'm still, you're still not there completely, but breathing has been breathing and the pre-practice or pre-game walk self-talk has become big for me. The second thing is to be interested, not interesting. And I think this means you want to treat people with respect, making them feel appreciated, making them feel valued, taking the onus off of yourself that you're not a me or an I guy. It's always we, it's always us. And Dr. Wade Gilbert, who's a sports coaching scientist, said that you're not coaching baseball players, you're coaching people who play baseball. So I think that was one of the things as a young coach, I did not look at it that way. I was looking at him, hey, that's my second baseman, and he's the second baseman. He wasn't some young person playing second. He was a player, and you treated it that way. So you're trying to show humility, while you're coaching, and basically intentionally doing it. Couple stories. One is there was an editor at Psychology Today who was writing a book. So he booked a ticket from New York to LA. And en route, he knew he'd be sitting next to someone, first class. And what he tried to do was on the entire flight, he asked the person questions. He didn't bring up his name. He didn't talk about him. Everything was directed towards him, asking him questions, being interested in what he was interested in, learning about him. So anyway, they get there. He has his assistant get in touch with this person and ask him about the gentleman he sat next to on the flight. What were his impressions? And he said, well, one, I don't even know his name. So he didn't even get his name. And two, he said he's the most interesting person I've ever met. So what does that tell you? I mean, the guy didn't even know his name, and he made him feel really good about himself. And he was very interested because he was interested in him. And how many of us actually do that? Herb Kelleher was the CEO at Southwest, and his number one trait was he was interesting. He was interested in what we did. He was interested in his employees. He made his employees feel valued. And I think that is something, that is a skill that, you need to be able to master. Learning someone's name. Learning someone's name. And that's something I am not very good at. You say, okay, Tom, you're right there. Say, I don't know Tom, but if I saw Tom, say, hey, Tom, how you doing? Nice to see you, Tom. Thanks for coming over. Have a great day, Tom. Take care. Tom, all of a sudden, just psychologically, that person becomes someone that they would like because they say your name. So that is crucial to be able to do that. And that is something that I am not very good at. But if you know someone, say, hey, Ken, how's your son doing in college? Is he still into music? How's your daughter doing? Are you still teaching and coaching? You're intentionally asking this person questions, and you're not worried about you. You're making it about them. And I think that is something in that you can do. One of the things too, and there's a number of other stories, but I'll give you two. One, what I started to do, and I've done this for a while, but I really didn't know the importance of it. Every time I go to a convention or every time I go somewhere and I see someone. So Randy, say I haven't seen you all year, and I show up at the football clinic and we talk. I will try to make a point that when I get home, I send you a handwritten note. And it was a pleasure to see you again. It was great to seeing you. Give me a call if you ever need anything. Best of luck this season. Something, anything like that. So that's something that I started to do years ago, and I think it's again you're showing interest in other people, and then that'll get you in terms of coaching. That can get you to get those players to do a little bit more. But here's my favorite story, and Brett's on the call here. Hey, babe. And I was speaking in Michigan, in 1997, in January of 1997. That was after the Olympics, and baseball went back to the Olympics that year. And Skip Bertman, if you don't know Skip Bertman, he was the baseball coach at LSU for years, won 5 national championships, became the AD. He's the guy that hired Nick Saban at LSU. They won the national championship. Well, Bertman is one of the speakers, and so am I. There's 3 of us, but he's speaking. And this particular day, there's about 500 coaches in this room, packed. Bertman's talking, Olympic coach, pitching guy, gets up, gives the talk. When he's done, I'm thinking to myself, they're all going to walk out of the room and follow him out in the hallway, and I'm going to be up there speaking to about 200 people or less. Not one of them left. He leaves, I get up, I give my talk. I think it was on trick plays, something, whatever, that was the talk. So, and he comes back in when I'm almost done, about halfway through, and he sits in the front row, right in front of me, and he listens to me talk. Now, get it out. Now, I'm 30. This is 97, so I'm 32 years old, 31 years old. As I'm leaving the stage, they're clapping, and, I guess I did a decent job. As I get down to the bottom of the stage, Bertman goes up onto the stage and says, "Hey, Barry, wait a minute. Just wait right there." So I stand there, and he proceeds to tell a story about the famous Miami pickoff play that they ran in the World Series that he had seen at a junior college game, and he went on and he told the story in great detail while I stood there. Now I'm 31, and here's the guy who's the Olympic coach who's won at that time 3 or 4 national championships. And then he looks over to me after he's done. He goes, "And that's why you got to work on these trick plays, because you never know, you might need them." Now, think about it. I didn't think about it at the time, but imagine he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to he made me feel like I should have been on the Olympic staff. When I walked out of there, I felt like $1 million. And then we went to lunch, and he said, "Come over and we'll have lunch." I mean, he made me feel so important, and he didn't have to do that. But he did it. So I'm like, can you do those types of things? Can you put yourself in those situations where you can make other people feel important? And that was one. That's probably one of my favorite stories. And the last one is creating an environment where people want to be at, where it's safe, an optimal environment. And I think what happens, and I've been subjected to it in staff meetings, you're afraid to talk. You're afraid to offer ideas because it's just not a safe place to say anything. It's like when you were in school and you didn't want to raise your hand because you'd get made fun of if you didn't have the right answer. So you didn't say anything. And I think that's bad. So creating that environment that you feel comfortable in, where you can be that person. Alan Mulally was the CEO at Ford and Boeing, and one of his key rules there was 2 things that he stressed. One is, if there's a problem, you let us know and we're going to fix it. We're going to figure it out. We're going to get some people on it. Don't you worry. We're going to work together. We're totally focused, but we're going to work together. It's always going to work out. And the other one was, we never, ever, ever made jokes at anybody's expense. No matter how funny you thought it might be, you're not playing around, because people are sensitive to that. Not everybody's the same. But in these big meetings, when he took over Ford stock was $1. I mean, now it's 12 or 13, but at the time it was about ready to fold, and they brought him in. But that was one of his things. We're always gonna work together, and we're always gonna fix the problems. And we want to hear your ideas. We want to know what you have to say. So the last man on the totem pole would have a voice, and I think that was important. And you would appreciate this one. Art Rooney, the old Steeler owner, football owner for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everybody loved this guy. And Terry Bradshaw was a first round pick. In 1970, he threw 6 touchdown passes and 24 interceptions. And think about that today. He wouldn't have lasted. But he was so distraught that Art Rooney knew that, but Art Rooney saw something in him and he would bring him over his house and Art would tell him, look, you're great. You're just like Babe Ruth. I've seen Babe Ruth. You know, he was an athlete. Billy Conn, the boxer, he would pump up Bradshaw, and Bradshaw loved being around him because he made him feel, so, like $1 million. He pumped him up. He was he made him feel confident. I mean, here's the owner of the Steelers, and he didn't have to do that, but he did, and he did that with a lot of people. There's one other story with him is that they were at Kurt Gowdy. You guys know Kurt Gowdy. Remember Kurt Gowdy? Kurt Gowdy was they were at the Kennel Club betting on the dogs, and Rooney was a big better. But he used to take his field crew to football games, away games. He would bring the field crew because he took care of them. He said he brings one of the field crew guys up to meet Kurt Gowdy, and he goes, this is Joe. He works in our organization. Now Joe works on the turf. He's probably just a lowly field guy. But he said that Kurt Gowdy he didn't know he could have been the vice president of the team, because he didn't say, hey, he's one of these guys on the ground crew. He said, he's one of our guys that works in our organization. So just those few little words, making someone feel better. And Rooney was somebody that did that, and he did it with Bradshaw, and he did it with his other employees. And Kelleher was the same thing at Southwest. He would treat his if you treat your employees right, the employees are going to treat the customers right. And that was the theory there. So there's three things. You keep your composure. You stay poised when the sea's rough. You're calm. You're interested, in your people, and then you just create an environment that's psychologically safe. And those are basically the three things. Remember the old Pete Carroll? Remember when Pete Carroll, when Eric Thomas hurt his knee, and they were carting him off the field, and he gave him the finger? Think about what Pete Carroll just killed that whole thing in the press conference. Told him to give the guy a break. I mean, what would you do? What would most people do if one of their students or employees gave them the finger? Would they be able to stay as calm? Randy, we're talking about Pete Carroll. There's a clear example right there. And another one in terms of people being interested. Greg Popovich, I'll make the story short. They lost to Miami, and they were devastated. They were going to win the NBA, and they had a 98.5% chance of winning the game. A guy had a crazy shot from the corner. They ended up losing in overtime, and they were crushed. So Popovich, instead of going back to the hotel, he said, look, we're still going to the restaurant. They had it already planned out. They're going to go to the restaurant and celebrate. He said, we're going to the restaurant. So the players are crushed. He gets there early, sets everything up, puts the chairs in the middle of the restaurant. And I remember now, it's about midnight. He puts the chairs in the middle where the players can sit in the middle, and the coaches and the families will sit on the outside. And the assistant coach, Sean Marks, said that he was devastated. He said you could see his emotions switch when the bus pulled up. He greeted every player. He said that he would hug some, he would make a joke, he would tap them, anything, some kind of gesture to make them feel, that everything's going to be okay. Here's the head coach. We had just lost probably the biggest game of the year. NBA championships right there. And he said, before you know it, the night they're talking, and they're feeling better about themselves. And what the story is that he was filling their cups. He was filling their buckets, because we all have a bucket, and you're either filling the bucket or you're taking from the bucket when you talk to your people. And in that particular situation, when the night ended, Popovich said, they said at Popovich, they'd never seen anything like before. He had brought that team together. And the last quick story was Nick Urin, which you don't know probably, suggested to Steve Kerr that we need to make a change in our lineup. Nick Urin was a film guy. He didn't even sit on the bench. He sat behind him. he suggested Kerr to switch to a smaller lineup. They did. They won 3 straight games and ended up winning the NBA. And he gave Nick Urin the credit at the press conference, saying, "Hey, it was Nick Urin's idea to move Iguodala, that was the guy, into the lineup and he removed the bigger guy." How many guys are going to say that? How many guys are going to go to the head coach who played for Jackson, who played for Popovich, who's won championships, the head coach? How many of the low level guys is going to go to the person and say, "Look, I think you need to make a change"? And he's not even on the staff necessarily. And Kerr was a leader, emotionally intelligent, understood it, allowed it to happen, made the change, and did not take credit for it. And those are some examples that I've learned over the years that to try to emulate that. So those are the 3 things. If you can do those 3, and plus you're competent, you're going to be pretty good. You're going to be a good coach. The guys are going to play for you. Gals are going to play for you. You're going to have respect for your peers, or have respect for you. It's just my last 5 years, I would say I've implemented a lot of that, and it's made a huge difference in the way that I do things. We have a team, like, to build leadership. We read a book, and we have guys. Oh, and this is a story, Brett, I just thought of it. We have a freshman. We have him stand up and talk about a chapter, and we're going around the room. Everybody's talking, doing a good job. Well, this freshman gets up, and he's having trouble, and he doesn't know what to say. And one of the guys closest to him, one of our players, goes, "It's okay. You're all right. We got you." Think about that. How many, one of our kids said that to him. His teammate, someone his age, said, "Listen, don't worry about it. We got you." Now that's going to translate to the game somewhere down the line when someone needs help or someone makes a mistake. So all this is it gets intertwined together, and it's a pretty cool thing when you watch it happen. But it's a slow process.
So let me ask you this, Barry. One of my biggest issues on the sideline was I did not want to be Tom Landry. I thought my players, high school players, would feed off my emotion. So I was probably Bill Cowher, but I leaned a little towards Gary Patterson. And if you guys know what, that ain't good, and he's a great coach. But if you were to, how would you? I think the biggest thing for coaches would be if you were to come watch me coach, and you felt like I was not emotionally intelligent enough. I'm not wording this very good, but I was fussing at the referees too much, and I threw my headphones here or something. And I wasn't a total idiot or anything, don't get me wrong, but um what would be after the game, if you were to coach me on how to stop doing that, what would it be?
Well, if I was watching the game and I was really focusing in on what you were doing, I'd have to be watching the game. I understand football, and I understand that certain things are going to trigger certain emotions. Um, I would think that, can you practice, you know, something? Can you play out in your mind before you get to the game a bad call that's going to cost you a first down, or one of your players jumps off sides when you've told him a million times to watch the ball. You're not listening to the cadence. You know, um, I think it's practice. I think you just have to learn to practice it. I think that your players, because as soon as something bad happens, what happens? The players have automatically, not all of them, but a lot of them look right at you to
Yeah.
see how you're going to react. And if you're able to stay calm, then they're able to stay calm. Because as coaches, what do we tell players to do? Would you calm to just, you got to be calm. You got to keep your composure, right? So it's hard for me because you're always talking about it. I am now. I'm talking about it a lot. So I tend to set the example. I'm able to, because I'm cognitively thinking it, I'm able to stay calmer. I've already kind of pre-planned how I'm going to react, in those situations. Now I would ask you, like, okay, did it change anything? Did it make it better? Does it ever make it better?
No, like it never
No.
does. But again, and I don't want to sound like someone who, was out of control, but okay, here's an example I thought of. Uh, we're in the second round and we're playing the number one team in the state, and we're playing where the Rangers used to play in Arlington. It's now a football field.
All right.
And we're playing so fast that one of their players on defense is trying to sub, and he comes off on our sideline to get off the field. Never seen it before. And somehow the referees don't see it. And it's early in the game and we're still in the game. And I'm having an outer body experience of like, here's this kid is on our sideline. This is a penalty. And I want to know, and if you could fix this for me, you'd probably, be a billionaire, but how can an AD watching this say to his young coach, hey, you got to do better than this emotionally, you got to have more EQ than this. And I heard you say imagery a while ago. I'm a big tactics guy. Like, I need you to give me homework, and here are three things you can do not to make a fool of yourself at the game, if that's fair.
Well, well, if a kid runs off the field on the wrong side and the referee doesn't see it, I think when you're directing your emotion sometimes at the officials, I think the players respect that. I think that does, because you're not directing it at them.
No,
When that's a
no, don't,
that's a coaching situation that I think you can certainly, you don't run down there and bump into the official. You know,
Right.
it's like the Jerry Glanville, I need to talk to the college guy. Come over here. You can't keep making those calls because it's NFL. It's not for long if you keep making those calls, and you wouldn't know Jerry Glanville was saying that if you didn't have the mic on him, but I mean, you can certainly get on the officials without being demonstrative. You can be professional in your dressing down of him. Like, what did you see? This is what happened. This is what, there's just a way of your body language is going to dictate that. And I think that would be something that you just have to practice. And it's not easy because you're emotionally attached to the game. But I do think the players don't see it that way. They would respect you
Yeah.
being upset because you're on their side.
But
There's language that you certainly can use or not use. There's an approach to be able to talk to the official in a certain way, and it's difficult. It's not easy.
um, I I used to referee basketball games, and I don't recommend this to anybody, but the hardest refereeing is junior high or middle school. Um, the better the level, the easier the game is to officiate.
Yeah.
So again, I want this for AD. So young basketball coaches would fuss at the referees, they're fussing at their players. And so, again, I feel like I'm probably wearing you out here, but if you had a nephew who was a junior high basketball coach and you watched him, um, would you just tell him the same stuff? Like, is there a difference in getting someone to have a better EQ as a young assistant versus a 52-year-old head coach?
I think it's this. I mean, a 52-year-old head coach should be. We go through this because we have our college that we work at. I mean, we watch. It does not help the basketball player at all when you are berating him on the sidelines. At all. It does not help at all. And I just refer to a guy like Dean Smith, who remains calm on the sidelines. Phil Jackson was calm on the sidelines. A little when he was early in his career, he had some, he had a little temper. I've seen video when he was in the CBA, but a lot of this comes with experience. A young coach, I would say, listen, first of all, it's a bad look
Oh,
You're
yeah.
the leader of the team. You're in the wide open. You know, you're right there on the sidelines, and you can't remain calm. Now, don't get me wrong. Dean Smith had got upset. I mean, he's gotten technical fouls before too. Because he probably just wouldn't stop saying things to the referee. But he never made any highlight films. Because he was losing his mind. What do we see now of Danny Hurley? He's really struggling with his emotional control. Um, so to me, hey, you're the leader. You're supposed to set the example. Let's take a deep breath. Let's think about what we did. Now, of course, at the end of the day, what did you do in that situation that you think it made it better for the player and for the team? And I guarantee you, if you can, you got to practice it. It's not easy because I've been there. I've gotten thrown out of games. I've yelled at players and done things I would never do today. But I always think that, listen, when the things were the worst, that's when I wanted to be at my best and say, look, we played a fall game this year. I said, look, we're down 6 runs. Okay. You're not swinging and when you get 3 balls and 1 strike, you're still taking. You're taking a strike, and if you get 3-1, you're still taking. Okay? That's it. Until we get either the tying run at the plate or the tying run or the winning run at the plate, whatever, depending on who you are. So for the next 3 innings, we played by those rules. I said, this is what we're going to do. And guess what? We came back, won the game. Now, is that my genius? Not necessarily. Of course, the other team had a lot to do with it because they couldn't pitch to it. But the point is, when I could have been the most upset, I was the calmest. And when we played Coastal Carolina and when we played Duke and when we played Oklahoma, there's no way that we should be able to beat those teams. But we went in, we stayed calm. It was just relaxing. And I think you got to train yourself to do it. And it just comes from experience. I'm telling you, it's just one of those things where you just have to practice it. It would be like you're coaching a team and you have a player who can't keep his composure on the field. What's the difference? So maybe in practice you have somebody hit him late. You just say, look, just hit him late and see how he reacts. Now you guys watch football games all the time. The team that loses their composure, gets the 15-yard penalty, takes a third and long down to a first down. I mean, it just comes down to being able to control yourself. You be self-aware, and to be able to control it. It takes practice. It's just you have to think about it cognitively. I just know that because I've been there. And when you fly off the handle, you're not thinking. You're just reacting. And it's just it's almost like you need to practice that, in practice where things go bad. And I think that's what I did with myself. My walk is I would prepare myself for that. And it was like a game to me. I have a game with myself to stay calm. We got beat one time by Fairfield, best team in our league, 17-2. We went out after the game. I didn't berate them. You got 2 more games. We got tomorrow. Come out tomorrow, and so and so's gonna pitch well. Hey, it's just that stuff happens. It just happens. And guess what? We won the next day, and then won on Sunday. Won the series. We didn't overreact. Just didn't overreact. And I think it's a true test of a great. Tom Landry, you mentioned. I mean, he was just stone faced. I don't even think he had any emotion. I think you still got to have emotion. You still got to, and I think the players appreciate that because you're in the game. But I think a lot of times we're talking about, directing it at the player, anger at the player.
Yeah.
Not really angry at, because we all want to win. And baseball, unlike a lot of sports, is very difficult to play as a player. A lot of outs, a lot of failure, and being able to deal with that. That's where Brian Cain made his career, learning it through baseball. Now he does so many other things, but he started with baseball because that's one of those sports where, pitching, hitting, fielding, difficult to do. A lot of, so being able to handle that. So from a coach, a leadership standpoint, I just think, think about it. You make make your environment, one that's centered around your values. What are your values? I didn't say that much earlier, but, and then you make them feel important. And then, you're able to control your emotions. And to me, those three things solve a lot of problems. A lot of problems. I think the thing you're talking about is like, if you don't get upset, you don't care enough. If you don't get too crazy, you're not caring enough. And I felt that way too. But I think the first, like I said, number one is control your emotions. Poise.
Yeah.
Keep your poise.
Yeah. Brian
Keep your
Kane
poise.
used to call it staying neutral. But he would tell me how important it was to be neutral. But I really didn't feel like he ever gave me, maybe he did, maybe he talked about breathing and all, but I think we all understand in the heat of the moment, breathing isn't the answer, when I'm about to kill little Johnny. So,
Yeah.
does Kirk or any of you guys,
I
Ken,
have something.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
How
Good
are you,
job.
Brett?
I'm good, Randy. How are you?
Good.
Good. Barry's probably I don't think he's gonna laugh at this, but I talk about it all the time. I'm surprised he didn't bring it up because it's something that we do in the house. But I think when we're in these emotional states, something's triggering us, and something's like coming from like deep down inside, and it's maybe something that it's a past experience, and so you have that emotional trigger. And the thing that we do, and I mean, I do it a lot, and Barry's getting really better at it, is just generous assumptions. And it's something I practice. Um, and I try to do it a lot. But really giving that the benefit of the doubt of that other person in the generous assumption. So it's a Brene Brown
Yeah.
method. And it's something that I took away from her workshop probably back in 2018 when she had her facilitators on campus doing like a women's leadership workshop. But having generous assumptions, meaning like you're looking at the other person and they are trying their best to do their best. But maybe there's something else going on and you just don't know, right? You don't know how everybody else is handling situations. So the best example, or the number one example I usually get is when you're driving in the car, right? It's road rage, always having road rage, right? Like people cut you off, things are happening, but when that person cuts you off, can you give them the generous assumption that, hey, their wife's in the front seat giving birth to their baby and they just need to floor it to the hospital? Go right ahead. Be all like, cut me off all you need because I know you got to go somewhere, right? And so it's like being able to put yourself in those situations to have generous assumptions so that you don't fly off the handle in a situation that probably is maybe
Yeah. It's good.
days on the line.
Yeah. With a player at practice or something like that. That's great.
Yeah. Maybe your player is coming home. I don't know. Maybe there was a fight in the family this morning. Mom and dad are fighting and he's just totally out of his mind right now and he's acting up and now you're on top of that, right? And that's not always the case, but I think for us when we challenge ourselves to think like that, our emotions go down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to respond instead of react. And so that always helps.
Yeah. If anybody watching this, I'm just trying to create a conversation of if you can be more like Pete Carroll or Steve Kerr, today's coach, Sean McVay with the Rams. Today's coach is not Bobby Knight, and you're not going to grow your program if you're making kids uncomfortable, and the AD is not going to be glad you're on the staff if your EQ is very low during games or practice. Anyway, Kurt, Ken, anybody else, like, do you have I was getting at this as a low EQ towards kids or referees. Is there anything else you guys would like to talk to Barry about?
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Barry. With your coaching staff, the three things you talked about, controlling your emotions, making sure they're interested, not interesting, and then creating the environment. Give me three simple habits that I could share with some of my younger coaches and say, if you can do these 3 things every day, this will help your coaching on the field? Is there some simple habits you have like that? I know you gave good examples, but something you may have used with your coaches or people who would come to ask you.
Well, I have the assistant coach who's now the head coach there now. I've noticed at times he would get on guys, like really get on them. And I would watch the kid, and I would see his, he wanted to send the guy home one time, and I'm like, and I would pull him off to the side and say, okay, you need to back off of him because you're picking on him because he's easy to pick on. So you can't just pick on just the easy guy to pick on, sometimes. So I think sometimes they don't realize it because they want to be in charge, in terms of control, making sure that hey, they if you're prepared at practice. Well, first of all, be prepared and know what you're talking about. I think that's the number one thing. You got to be prepared, and you're not doing it on the fly. I think that's one of the key things there in terms of. But just staying calm again. It's what are some things that you do? Like we have a pitching coach. He doesn't talk to the pitcher. He's mad at the pitcher. He won't talk to him. Like you got to be bigger than him. You're the adult here, even though the age difference is not huge. But you are the adult here. Um, the value thing with the environment is like what are your values? Like for me, mine are pretty. I'm self-disciplined, and I try to be the best at what I what are they? Like what are your values? Like we bring the players in, and we want our practices and our environment to kind of reflect, what the values are. We want to be the best at, the best we can. We want to be self-disciplined, trying to do the right things. And the other one was personal fulfillment for me. So we're trying to have fun with it. But I'm trying to get to question. The answer to your question is that the habits to create, like we want our talk to your players, like talk to all of them. I think that's important. The lowest guy on the team, lowest, you just talk to the, your starters. We have a little bit of that, Brett, with Jack. You're hearing that he doesn't feel like that he's getting the coach is talking to him enough. So you got to talk to all of them. Ask them more than just how they're doing baseball wise. Ask them how life is. We often ask our players too, how do you want to be coached? A lot of these meetings I would have with the players, the assistant coaches would be in there with me. How do you want to be coached? When things are really bad, like when you're not doing what we want you to do, what do you want us to do? How do you want us to, what's going to make you play better or make you concentrate more? And then the other thing is, if there's a real problem, always ask them, what are 2 solutions? Like you give me the solutions. And I think that's one thing that I started to do later on. Like if there was a problem, you say, okay, you're not doing well in school. All right, so what can we do? Well, I can go to class. All right, that's a start. I can talk to the professor. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And then you get them out of there. Another technique is that instead of meeting them in the classroom, go for a walk. Go out, walk around the school or walk around the field. They feel less contained. It's a little more relaxing. That's something I got from Sherry Cole, Randy. She stressed that. Always ask the player, what did you see? What did you see there? What happened? What were you seeing? Why did you take off there? Why did you not do this or not do that? What did you visually see? What did you think you were doing? Explain it to me. And sometimes some of them don't really know what to tell you because I don't know. Well, help. Let me hear it. Tell me something. And you'd be surprised. They'll talk. They'll say, well, I don't know I don't know, coach. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, now I got to teach you better. So the other thing that I've noticed is that we tell them this all the time. Well, you didn't tell them enough. You got to keep telling them. It's the old Tony Mason thing that I rekindled, is like when you give a 10-minute talk, your players in a 48-hour period are going to lose 50% of that talk and only retain 25% of it. That's why you got to keep going over it and over it and over it and over it. And I think that's something that you're teaching the coaches. That would be something that I would be adamant about. And I'm about to possibly work for another school. There's 2 young coaches. I'm a lot older. Here's my chance to kind of put some of these principles into play when I go to see practice. Like, I'm going to go to a practice on Saturday. I haven't decided whether I'm going to work with them or not. And then I'm going to watch and see what how the tone is and see what they're doing. I'm anxious to see it. Because I look at myself now as sort of I would say I'm an expert, but I'm a sage in a way. Like, I've made so many mistakes, and I've made some good decisions, and that doesn't work, you know. But I would highly recommend our guys to be organized. I think organization covers up a lot of holes. You know, if you don't know what to do, get it down on paper, and you can visualize practice, like what it should look like. What I think what should be going on here. Make the adjustments another thing we talk about a lot. If something's not going right, and you didn't do a very good job planning it, just stop. Just adjust, and let's see if we can make it better. So we say MTA a lot. It's on the inside of our rings. We have one of our championship rings. We put it on the inside because that's like one of our acronyms that we use quite a bit. So when things don't go well, hey, MTA, just make the adjustment. Good. And don't worry about it. The other thing is, if you have a drill that you go for 15 minutes and say that drill you're running it horrible. It's terrible. The old coaches like Randy, you might say, we're going to do this for another 3 hours. We're going to get it right. I don't know if you did that. But yeah. And guess what? I don't know if it got better. It probably got worse. But over my experience is, just stop. Just stop. Just forget it. It's okay. We'll come back tomorrow. One of my assistant coaches actually said that because he had worked under a guy that would just stay with it. And you miss out on other parts of practice that you need to practice too. We can always come back. We never lost the championship because of a 15-minute drill we couldn't get right. We'll get it right tomorrow. And I'll teach it better. So that's the, you never overteach, always overteach, overcommunicate. Overteach, overcommunicate, and then let them play. That's the other thing. Let them play in the games. I did learn that. Practice was mine. Games are yours. And it's like the old. Brett and I were at a convention, and Nathan Whitaker's an author, and he wrote a book with Tony Dungy. And I asked him, I said, what did Dungy tell you about Chuck Noll that you can give me that was a good thing or something I could take away? I can't remember the exact question, but he said that he went to Chuck Noll before a game and said, look, I'm really nervous about tomorrow's game. They do this and they do that. He told him, said, stop, just stop. We're going to a museum. You prepared them. You got them ready. They're ready. Don't worry about it. You got them ready. So Noll was assuring his assistant, who put the time in, that we're going to be fine. Let's go get some wine, and let's go downtown and let's do some sightseeing. And he said that he learned that from Noll. You do your prep, prepare, and then let's go. It's like studying for the test 5 minutes before you take it. It ain't gonna work. You got to put the work in. Do what the little thing. What is the saying? Do a little, a lot.
Yep.
Not a lot, a little. Type thing. That's one of Kane's sayings, but it is true. Prepare, get them ready. And then we'd have a meeting in the morning at breakfast, and I'd say, listen, you're ready to go. We got you ready. And maybe in our minds we weren't ready, but you make them believe they're ready, you know? Um, and I think that's the fun part, enjoying about fixing the problems. I think that's the fun part about that's one of the fun things about coaching, is and that kept me calmer because I'm like, all right, I know what I'm doing. I already know what I want to do. Now I just need to communicate it properly. If they don't get it, well, tell what don't you understand? Like what is it that I'm not saying? What is it, you know, what is it I'm not saying? That doesn't make sense. Um, we had a kid keep screwing the same thing up, and I looked at him. I said, Eric, are you ever going to get this? He goes, yes, sir. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. I said, all right. That's all I said. He kept running in the wrong. He was a terrible base runner, terrible base runner. And I just would say to him, are you going to ever get this? I didn't yell at him or anything. And he just looked at me and goes, yes, sir, I'll get it. I'm going to get it. And I just smiled. And it was, they feel okay. It's okay. I think it's okay to make mistakes because we make a lot of them. And that's the other thing. You admit your mistakes first. Like, hey, when I was in college, I did the same thing. You know, I didn't go to class either. And guess what? My coach ran me and da 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 da. So I understand. So, you put the mistake on you. And when you make a mistake, you admit it. And it's easy for them to accept that. They like that. And then it's easy for them to admit their mistakes because you can admit yours. I think that's important.
So, yeah, I'm sorry to end this, but I got to take a daughter to gymnastics. So,
Yeah.
Barry, it was awesome. Barry is going to release a book called Old Dog New Tricks. When is that going to be released, Barry? Do you know?
I'm not sure exactly, but it most likely be later this spring. Old
Okay.
Dog New Tricks: The Power of Leading with Emotional Intelligence. It's a story about a basketball coach who's a pro basketball coach who gets fired because of his emotional outbursts, and he is hired to coach women's basketball at a college that's not very good. So
Awesome.
he's hired to turn it around, and he's also hired by the president who says, look, you have to answer to me, and I'm going to help you with your emotional intelligence. So they meet, weekly, daily, every other day. There's a lot of meetings and there's a lot of lessons, and it's a pretty good little story, I think, for coaches. And there's a lot of things you can take from it. Within, you got to read between the lines on some of the things, and it makes you think about what you can do with your program that may be more consistent with a baseball program or a softball program or a football program. You can put a lot of those principles to use. So I'm excited about it coming out.
Barry, this was awesome, buddy. Give us your email if anybody wants to contact you, if that's okay.
Well, there's two. You can contact me. Email is barry@drbarrydavis.com. And then my website, if you want to subscribe to get the 5 pillars of transformation and sustainability, you just go to drbarrydavis.com and you just sign up, and then you'll get weekly emails, little tips and stories and things. A lot of the things about the book are going to be in those emails as we build up to the launch date.
Great. Thank you, Barry. You're awesome.